Alright, so this will be the final video for winter break, and this may even be the final Miraculous Ladybug video in general. I'm not sure I'll make videos or continue making videos once season 4 comes out. I may just stop now. I mean, I have no more ideas for any more season 3 videos, so there's that. Like I said, this is the final video, not just for Winter Break, but for Miraculous Ladybug, at least for season 3. I may make some more for season 4, like I said, but ultimately I don't know. That's all, probably not. That's ultimately up to my discretion. So with that out of the way, I should mention that because I've brought up this video before in previous videos or previous Miraculous Ladybug videos, and the past couple, especially the last one, I did say that I finally came up with an idea for what I want to do for this video, because my inspiration for this video came from not even rewatching the show, just thinking about the season 3 finale and thinking about some major I wouldn't necessarily, yeah, some major implication actually from the finale that I didn't talk about in my implications video that I still want to bring up, so I kind of formulated this video around this. And that implication is obviously going to be during, I'll talk about during the second half of the video, which is going to be how Ladybug and Noir can figure out their identities, or the easiest way they can figure out their identities within the show is obviously, as onlookers, we know and we could theorize how they could come up with their identity, but taking the perspective of someone within the show, that's obviously a different story. And in regards to the first half of this video, this is really something I haven't done yet. I actually brought it up in one of my, I brought it up in, I think it was my season 3 predictions video, my initial season 3 predictions. So not the predictions reflections or the season 4 and 5 predictions, but the season 3 predictions video. I brought up a theme within, or a theme that I noticed within season 2, and which was made apparent through a season 2 finale. So that's been on my mind ever since then. I never really made a video on it until now, as I'm going to go over it. But yeah, because obviously also that was compounded by season 3. There was a theme for season 3, and it was made apparent in the finale. So that's something because we've gotten basically an extra season's worth of content, and we got more an extra theme we could talk about, that would make it would make the topic basically, it would make it talkable as opposed to simply mentioning it in a video. So that's why I'm talking about it. I'll also mention some of season 1 because that just came into my mind. So yeah, I mean, it was more so I was thinking about it before I was going to make this video, and I was thinking about what I could possibly, if I could talk about season 1, and a theme did sort of come to my mind. Or it's more so a characteristic or a trait, more so than a theme, but it still applies because that's really what I'm going to talk about and explain. So yeah, with that out of the way, this video, honestly, honestly, this video shouldn't take as long. It's definitely not going to be as long as the last video. I should have probably said that before. I could have probably made the recording order of my videos for winter break different. It probably would have been better, because the last video I made, this season 3, how it should have happened, that was sort of the culmination of most of my videos, and this video is kind of just an extra video that I didn't initially plan on doing, but I got the idea for. So yeah, that's ultimately why I wanted to make this video. Yeah, mainly just because I got the idea for it, and I figured I could talk about stuff that I mentioned before but haven't really gone into too much detail on, and obviously this was another topic or more content I could cover, so I really wanted to make the video. So just hold on just a moment. For whatever reason it wasn't open, so I mean, yeah, with that out of the way, I think I'll get right into it. I honestly don't think this video will take as long. I'm kind of just freeballing this video. The last one I kind of had a script, not a script, but I had bullet points or whatnot, stuff that I wanted to cover, definitely. But I mean, this video really is just kind of it wasn't necessary to make, as opposed to season 4 and 5 predictions was necessary, considering I actually did better than I thought on season 3, so I wanted to try my hand at season 4 and 5. Episode mistakes, season 3 episode mistakes, that was a necessary video because I needed to talk about that in order to basically I guess we can just go through all the videos that ultimately went into my season 3 how it should have happened before we get into this video. So I actually think the first video that went into it was my Miraculous Ladybug future timeline and problems with the current timeline. That was one I recorded during Thanksgiving break, as I intended to do a season 4 predictions in the future timeline. But since then I learned that there's also a confirmed season 5. So rather than do a separate current and future timeline predictions for season 4, I instead try to predict basically till the end of the show, assuming season 5 is the end. So the Miraculous Ladybug future timeline problems with the current timeline video, there is, like I said, season 3 prediction reflections in a sense, because that's kind of tied in as I brought up my season 3 predictions in the video. So season 3 predictions reflections, season 4 and 5 predictions as I brought up some of that. Season 3 or mistake episodes or whatnot, or season 3 mistakes, and that's where I talked about the mistake episodes, and I think there was one more. Oh yeah, season 3 things we still don't know. So those are 5 videos that went into and culminated into the season 3 what should have happened video, and that was a long video. I mean, I had to record it in 2 nights. I probably should have split it up, but I mean, I didn't really intend to split it up. I should have split it up like my Marinette akumatized finale predictions video, but I honestly didn't intend to. I only made the split in the second day simply because I had to do something. So, but yeah, in reality, I probably should have split it up. I can re-upload it and split it up, but I mean, I'm not really sure that's worth it. So, yeah, I guess with that out of the way, I kind of don't really know why I talked about that. That's not really relevant towards this video, but yeah, I kind of wanted to get that out of the way as sort of like an explanation for the previous video. So, yeah, now going into this video, like I mentioned before, this video is going to be split into 2 parts. It's going to be split into the themes of Miraculous Ladybug, and then how the easiest way Ladybug and Chat Noir can figure out each other's identities within the show, not like being an onlooker, but within the show itself, like the context of the show, and like taking a perspective from Adrian and Marinette themselves in order to figure this out. So, and obviously, because we know they're Ladybug and Chat Noir, and they would still know that too within this show, so that obviously wouldn't change, but like we wouldn't be able to see what they couldn't see, pretty much. So, yeah, I mean, I think we just go right into it. That's really all I have to say before the video, so yeah. So for Miraculous Ladybug themes, I couldn't actually think of overall themes, or let's just put it this way, overall themes, there would be too many for me to cover. Basically, there's a lot of themes that go into this show that I could talk about, but there would just be simply too many, like, overall, just to cover in general. So I kind of doubled down on my season themes idea. And basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the most apparent theme within each season and how it makes itself, or how it realizes itself in the finale. As the finales of each season ultimately make the themes, the themes materialize in the season finale. They become more apparent in the finale than any other episode. Granted, there may be instances in previous episodes where the theme is made apparent, but it's most apparent in the finale, and that's basically when you figure out the themes. And then if you go back and you watch, then you can think, oh yeah, this is ultimately this instance in an earlier episode shows the theme that you wouldn't have noticed earlier, because you wouldn't have known until the finale. So with that out of the way, I think I just go right into season 1. Season 1, granted, the main problem with season 1 is that there's no real story or plot development. I mean, not until the end, at least. The last 3 episodes being, Volpina, and then Stoneheart, Part 2, or Origins and Origins Part 2. For the sake of this video, I'm gonna put Stoneheart at the end, or I'm gonna consider the Origins episodes at the end of season 1 as opposed to the beginning, simply because those are the episodes when the theme is made apparent. It was last in release date, but obviously it's first canonically, so like within the show itself, like within the show's timeline. So yeah, let's just talk about it. But here's the thing, because there's no story, because there's no real story development or no plot development that doesn't necessarily not allow for a theme. It just is more restrictive in what the themes should be. But when I in what the themes could be. But when I mention the theme or when I talk about the theme, it will make sense why. So now the theme made apparent in the Stoneheart Origins like part 1 and part 2 season finale is duty. It's literally just that. Like the word duty, like whatever it means to you. Basically duty being like doing not necessarily what is right, as I'm going to talk more about that in season 2, but either what is expected of you or what is ultimately not, I wouldn't even necessarily say best, but doing what is expected of you or doing what other people need you to do, basically. Because doing what is right doesn't necessarily apply to that, as that's more a choice. But duty is more so an obligation or a fulfillment, where you do, basically, you do whatever task you need to do. I've completely forgot what I said earlier, but you do whatever task that is expected of you or that people need you to do. I think, yeah, I mentioned that earlier. I kind of forgot. That's why, like, I literally just blanked for that moment, but that's pretty much what duty means, at least within the context of the show, as granted in Stoneheart, in the Origins Part 1 and 2 episodes, like, during the finale of the season, that's when Marinette and Adrien get their Miraculous. So that's obviously a theme that would be present then, as they need to ultimately make the choice whether, as they were chosen by Master Fu, but ultimately they need to make the choice of whether or not they use their powers to help, like, the Parisian public while Stoneheart was akumatized, or ultimately just sit back and, like, watch it happen in fear, ultimately not wanting to get involved. Now, we know the choice Adrien and Marinette make. Adrien, he was like that, and he was wanting to transform and wanting to fight Stoneheart. However, that honestly, what that really shows to me more so than anything else, it doesn't really show to me a lot about Adrien's character necessarily, but it shows to me how much Marinette is the main character in the season as opposed to Adrien. Because Marinette and Adrien are kind of like, it's a weird position where they're kind of both considered the main characters of the show, but I mean, given that Adrien had almost no, like, what would you call it, no sort of development in terms of leading up to his ultimate transformation. He had no sort of second thoughts about transforming. He wasn't, like, worried or fearful at all. That kind of really skipped the whole development phase of what would be his, like, initial exposition, like, character arc, going from figuring out what the Miraculous is as opposed to using it. Marinette, on the other hand, she has a full sort of development with that. I mean, she opens the Miraculous and she gets scared by Tiki, as opposed to Adrien, who's, like, intrigued. And ultimately, Tiki kind of, like, explains everything. She has the Miraculous and she has the opportunity to use it, but she doesn't actually use it initially, as opposed to Adrien, who pretty much immediately transforms. Marinette doesn't use it initially. Instead, she kind of rejects, like, what is supposedly her being chosen to fight the villain. And that, like, when you look at characters' story arcs in the concept of, like, any story or, like, any written fiction or whatnot, there's sort of, like, the initial rejection of what they were chosen to do, or basically in fulfilling their duty. Like, Adrien, he was just up and running, like, with the Miraculous. He had no, like, qualms. He did his duty, but that, in which may seem like a good for Adrien, I think it more so really shows us how much more, or basically how Marinette is more so the main character as opposed to Adrien, because she went through that initial character arc or that initial character development where she was initially not wanting to use the Miraculous. And then obviously when she sees her friend Alia pinned up by a car against, like, a house, then that's sort of her call to action is what. Like, you literally see the scene, she looks shocked, and then ultimately Alia gets pinned and she calls for help, and then she gets the look of determination on her face, goes back to her house, and ultimately transforms. Because here's the thing, simply accepting your duty from the get-go, although it may seem like a better or someone who would more so be obligated to their duty like Chat Noir, that actually wouldn't necessarily be the case. I would argue that Marinette going through that initial rejection phase of doing her duty and then ultimately seeing through her surroundings or whatnot, or through basically events that have happened which caused her to realize that she needed to do her duty. I would say that realization and ultimately her the initial rejection and then realization that she ultimately not only needs to fulfill her duty, but that she, I wouldn't even necessarily say want to, like it's more than a want, that basically it's what, I wouldn't say like it's what she's hoped for her life, but I would more so say she realized that not only she needs to do it, but it's what she was meant to do, as opposed to wanting to do it like Adrian, as he immediately transforms into Chat Noir. Marinette realizes that it's what she was meant to do, and that is what I would say a stronger overall stronger sense of duty than Adrian, who does it because even though he immediately puts on the miraculous and transforms and realizes what he has to do, it's not, like I said, more so out of him knowing it's what he was meant to do. It's more so him wanting to do it or him feeling like he needs to do it. But as with Marinette, obviously, like I said, with the initial rejection phase and ultimately her realization that basically she has to do it. Ultimately, it's not more so a sense of want or need. It's more so a sense of it's what she was meant to do. It's kind of what her life has been leading up to at that moment. And that, I would say, is an overall stronger sense of duty than what Adrian has. Because there's obviously different levels. Like, you can have various, like, in real life, you could obviously have a sense of duty to, let's say, your family, let's say, your job, let's say, even, like, your country, let's say, even, like, let's say you're in a gang, you can have a sense of duty to, like, a gang or whatnot. But I doubt if you're in a gang, you're watching this. No one, well, I guess, I haven't seen the average watch time, but some people may just skip to the middle, and this is what they hit on, so I guess I may as well keep it relevant. But, yeah, overall, like I said, Marinette has a stronger sense of duty to Adrian because of everything I mentioned. And overall, that's why duty is the main theme in season 1, because obviously in the Origins episode, Stoneheart Part 1 and 2, in technically the season finale, which, like I said, the themes would be made apparent in, ultimately that is what the episode revolves around. It doesn't really revolve around Adrian, as it gave, like I said, one scene, Adrian puts on the miraculous, he's ready to go. But Marinette, like I said, she needs to go through that initial rejection of her duty phase and ultimately realization that's what she was meant to do. And ultimately that's when her duty is realized, and it's a stronger sense of duty than Chat Noir. So that's really basically the focal point of Origins Part 1 and 2, Stoneheart, the season finale. And duty, like, it's really the only, like, you can't really argue otherwise, especially for an Origins episode, especially for a superhero Origins episode. Duty is really kind of the only option for that, as obviously the person beneath the mask ultimately has to decide whether or not they want to help the public and endanger their own life. But obviously, with your sense of duty, with a great sense of duty, which is what the show, which is what the theme of especially those two episodes, but the whole season 1 is, that's ultimately what caused them and drives them to do that. So, yeah, with that out of the way, I think I'm done talking about the season 1 finale. During the entirety of season 1, here's the thing. Because the theme is duty, they're is doing their duty. There doesn't really need to be any sort of story or plot development within season 1 in order to make that realized. I mean, simply Ladybug and Chat Noir standing up, fighting any Akuma or any Akumatized villain Hawkmoth throws their way is duty enough. Especially when in their civilian form, especially when they take considerations of ultimately when the next Akuma will be, or ultimately what their doings in their superhero form outside of fighting Akumas, how that would affect or how that would impact their ability to fight Akumas or whatnot. And Chat Noir is clearly, obviously, he's more like, what would you say? Or he's more likely to like do some sort of event like, or he's more likely to use his superhero persona while not fighting Akuma than Ladybug and Marinette. Because we've seen Marinette take considerations before, like rejecting events as Ladybug simply because she is a superhero and that is her that is her primary focus. That is her duty. She has no obligation to like appear on camera for something, as opposed to Adrian and Chat Noir, given he's doing it because he wants to, or even if because he needs to, that still doesn't like sort of prevent him from, let's say, doing doing stuff like using his superhero persona outside of fighting akumatized villains. That his sense of duty doesn't stop him, as opposed to Marinette's sense of duty, which does stop her, and ultimately that's shown in season 1 multiple times. So, granted, that's kind of really the main point I wanted to make. Just because there wasn't any story or plot development in season 1 doesn't mean the season 1 theme wasn't made apparent, because ultimately in season 2 and 3, their themes and ultimately are revolved around their story and plot. So yeah, that's just kind of the last point I wanted to make for season 1. So just hold on a moment. Alright, so yeah, with season 1 out of the way, I think we move on to season 2. And yeah, I did definitely mention this in my season 3 predictions video, but I think let's just get right into it. There's no need to hold up. So the season 2 theme, which is especially made apparent in the finale, is doing the right thing. That was made basically, not even just the finale, but I would say the latter half of the season as well. It was made really apparent. Now, during the finale, this is a single instance, as opposed to kind of like an evolution of character, like the season 1 where Marinette and Adrien find their sense of duty or whatnot, and how Marinette is ultimately stronger because of her rejection and subsequent realization. But this is more so just specific instances within the season finale and the overall latter half of the season, as it's not a character trait. It's more so in action. Now, I'm going to assume just everyone watching this video has watched the season 2 finale, but ultimately the points, it's obvious, but the ultimate way that doing the right thing is made apparent in the finale is when Scarlet Moth, basically all of his Scarlet akumatized people or villains, they get destroyed, and Marinette and Chat Noir confront him on the Eiffel Tower. However, rather than actually confronting Scarlet Moth, they're confronting his illusion made by Volpina, so he can ultimately try and akumatize them one last time before he fights them. But while Ladybug and Chat Noir are confronting his illusion, he sort of talks about he boasts saying, "Oh, how'd you know my wish wouldn't be beneficial for everyone?" And they're saying they said something like, "It's not worth the cost," or something like, "Why don't you tell us your wish then?" And then he responds to something like, give me your miraculous and you'll find out," whatnot. But that's not really the point. So the point is, his illusion's kind of just standing there. So while they're talking, the illusion actually can't really act. So rather than immediately fight Hawkmoth like Ladybug and Chat Noir, they instead walk up to him. And what Ladybug does is she uses her lucky charm and she gets a miraculous box or whatnot, and she says basically it's a sign that you'll lose. And she basically, what she does is, while Chat Noir definitely wants to go in and fight Hawkmoth, rather than do that, what Ladybug does is she kind of just stands there, holds out the miraculous box, and she says, I think the literal quote is, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure what she says goes something along the lines of this. It's it's never too late to do the right thing. Or that first they walk up to Hawkmoth, or Hawkmoth's illusion, then Hawkmoth's illusion is kind of stunned. That's by Volpina's doing or Hawkmoth. But I mean, rather than immediately fight him, go into close quarters combat, Ladybug, she holds out the miraculous box that she got from her lucky charm and says, I'm pretty sure it's never too late to do the right thing. And that's really when it's made apparent, because Ladybug and Chat Noir, they stopped every phase of Hawkmoth's plan so far up to this point. Phase 1 being it was Sabrina, who was invisible, following Ladybug to try and find the Guardian of the Miraculous's house. Phase 2 is ultimately when, after they defeat all the initial Scarlet akumatized villains, when Hawkmoth uses Dark Cupid to ultimately re-anger them, and he re-akumatizes them. So ultimately, all of the people who Ladybug and Chat Noir purified were back, or de-akumatized were back. The third phase is when ultimately Hawkmoth uses Chloe's parents in order to make Chloe as Queen Bee susceptible to emotion, so that she gets ultimately she gets akumatized, as well as Nino and Alia ultimately getting akumatized as well in their supervillain forms, leaving just Ladybug and Chat Noir. The fourth phase being him basically driving them underground and sending his akumatize villains in order to get them. And then the fifth phase sort of being once Ladybug and Chat Noir reemerge after the entirety of Paris's water system is frozen, which he intended to freeze them. Basically, the fifth phase being all his sort of giant or sort of like Titan Akumas basically defending him around the Eiffel Tower, and they obviously get around all that. And this is actually the sixth phase of his plan. Him being basically Volpina using him, or basically making an illusion of him, in that ultimately he will have one last bid for their Miraculous before they have no choice but to fight. However, despite all the phases that have preceded them, Ladybug, not even Chat Noir, Ladybug still offers Hawkmoth the chance to do a right thing. Despite all their history before then, all her friends that Hawkmoth is akumatized, she still offers him the chance to do a right thing. And I think ultimately that sort of capitalizes not only on Marinette's sense of duty, but ultimately just her sort of, what would you call it, like moral kind of like code there. Like, that's a good way to put it. Basically, that ultimately her doing her duty, as well as her offering him the chance to doing the right thing, really goes to really shows her overall moral code in the show. Now, obviously, we know what happens. Hawkmoth still goes through with his try to akumatize them. He fails, and they ultimately fight. But that's really how sort of doing the right thing was made apparent through the season finale. Now, even though it was one instance in the season finale, or the season 2 finale, we are still shown why it is ultimately an overall theme for season 2, or an overarching theme for season 2. Because we simply don't realize it until the finale with the specific instance, but it's ultimately realized, like I said, throughout the latter half of season 2 as well, not just the finale. So, hold on. Alright, so it's realized. Another big episode that's realized in is ultimately Queen Bee, or I don't even know what the episode title was. It wasn't Style Queen, or I guess it could be both a part of Style Queen and sort of Chloe's episode where she got akumatized as Queen Bee, because that's kind of like a 2-part episode, even though it's not really. But I mean, basically when Chloe goes on a rampage as Queen Bee is ultimately Ladybug and Chat Noir because Ladybug wants the Beer Miraculous back, but Chloe doesn't want to give it to her. She basically goes on a rampage, basically stages her saving a train or whatnot. Basically, Ladybug and Chat Noir call her out on it, and then Hawkmoth ultimately ends up akumatizing Chloe, who was already transformed with the Beer Miraculous, which is a first for the season, and she ultimately has to fight Ladybug and Chat Noir. And ultimately, Ladybug and Chat Noir defeat her, and then rather than be angry at her, they instead basically offer her a chance to do the right thing, seeing that fighting isn't going to get them anywhere. And this is Ladybug specifically. Seeing that fighting isn't really going to get her anywhere, she offers Chloe the chance to do the right thing, ultimately basically erasing her past wrongs that she caused with her Miraculous, and her initial denial of forfeiting it back to Ladybug. Rather than forcibly take it from Chloe, or rather than fight her again, she instead simply offers her to give it to Ladybug on her own terms, which she does, which shows that it's better to having a moral code isn't necessarily, what would you call it, like inefficient. It's not, having a moral code doesn't go against your sense of duty, which we've already established in season 1. But basically, Marinette as Ladybug in this instance, in fact, following her moral code and offering Chloe the chance to do the right thing actually solves the conflict more peacefully than how she could have if she instead started fighting Chloe as Queen Bee again. So that's really another point another instance it's made during season 2. And it's actually really made in many other events and instances during season 2 as well. It's simply, those are the main 2 that come to mind, and those are the main 2 I'm really going to talk about. Because ultimately, sort of doing the right thing, it does require some sort of story and some sort of plot, because you need like a story like related event to happen in the show so that Marinette can offer, or basically anyone can offer someone a chance to do the right thing, like as we saw in Chloe transform or akumatizes Queen Bee episode, and in the season 2 finale Scarlet Moth. So you do need some story related events for that to happen. You also need some plot and some character growth in order for the characters offering the other people the chance to do the right thing, so that it would make sense for them as opposed to kind of coming out of nowhere. That's why like the first half of the season is really sort of a character growth arc for a lot of people, and ultimately how and that's not just for season 2 but season 3 and season 1 as well. And then the latter half of the season is where ultimately the story events are realized, and it ultimately makes sense why the characters do what they do, because they had that character arc or characters growth in the first half of the season. So their actions, like Chloe offering, or Marinette as Ladybug offering Chloe the chance to do the right thing, and Marinette offering Hawkmoth himself the chance to do the right thing, isn't out of the ordinary because she had that character development through a plot. So yeah, I mean, hold on. Alright, so yeah, that was season 2. That was specifically season 2 themes. That's really all I want to talk about. Now, on to the season 3 themes. This is really what I wanted to hit on. The season 3 theme, which is made apparent through the finale, is it's kind of 2 themes, but it's really sort of 2 parts to 1 theme. It's 2 parts of a process. It's like 2 individual like it can't be one of them more than it can't be the other. It has to be both, and it's really made apparent in the season 3 finale. And that is failure and resolve. Both. Not one or the other, and not them two separately, but both of them together. Because this is special in that this is expressed in instances and events, but it also has more to deal with character as opposed to doing the right thing, which is sort of like a one-time event. Failure and resolve, it's kind of like an overarching event for a character as opposed to like a single instance, like Ladybug offering Chloe the chance to do the right thing, Ladybug offering Hawkmoth the chance to do the right thing. Failure and resolve is more so not necessarily a character trait like duty, but it's more so an overarching like character sort of like development. It isn't a single instance or event. It really takes up a character's whole arc. So there's that. Yeah, I'll actually come back to this video. I'm gonna split it into 2 parts because it actually is getting longer than I thought. So in the next part, I'll cover. Given I already had that explanation, I'll go right into detail in the season 3 finale when those are made apparent, and then I'll also go into how Ladybug and Chat Noir can figure out each other's identities within the show. So I mean, there's that. Should transition like 3. Yeah, it should just transition now. Alright, so continuing right off, I'm going to get into the season 3 theme and how it's made apparent in the finale. I've already explained what the season 3 is, but I just need to explain how it's made apparent in the finale, as well as then subsequently how we realize it was made apparent in other episodes. So the way that the theme of season 3, which is failure and resolve, both combined, not separate, is made apparent in the season 3 finale is actually through Marinette's breakdown. Like, it was right at the end of the first episode and right at the beginning of the second episode of the season finale. I think the 2 episodes are Love Eater and what's the second episode? Is it Miracle Queen? I think it is Miracle Queen or something along those lines. But yeah, so Marinette's breakdown is actually a really great. I actually mentioned how there were multiple in the season finale, but I'll get into the arcs. But yes, the most apparent one is, and the way it's made most apparent is through Marinette's breakdown and during the middle of the season finale. Now, basically, what happens is, in case you didn't know, because I mean, I just watch them online, but I mean, some people actually wait for like the episodes to come out on like streaming services or whatnot, so they might not have them yet. But I mean, the way it's basically what happens is Marinette ultimately, she is confronted with a Akuma. Gabriel as Hawkmoth ended up akumatizing Mr. and Mrs. Bourgeois. So Marinette as Ladybug was confronted by that, and she actually she actually went to Master Fu in order to get one of the Miraculous in order to give it to someone that can help her as well as Chat Noir fight it. However, she didn't transform before she went to see Master Fu, so ultimately Hawkmoth was watching, so now he knew the location of Master Fu, so ultimately Hawkmoth ended up confronting Master Fu, and that was honestly one of the best moments in the whole season. I've been waiting for that moment the whole season. So, and then ultimately he ended up he ended up basically kidnapping Master Fu, bringing him to like a rooftop or whatnot, and also taking the miracle box. And he ended up giving it to Chloe, and the rest of the events following that ended up happening. But ultimately, this failure was what sort of broke Marinette. Is she was already, I think she was definitely already under stress for reasons previous. I don't exactly remember what, but she was already stressed, and then this failure combined with that basically what she saw as failing Master Fu and ultimately failing all of Paris as coming from a single mistake. She saw that as ultimately a great failure as opposed to, a simple accident or whatnot. So ultimately, she blamed herself for Master Fu's condition as well as likely her and Chat Noir's demise. So ultimately, she de-transformed. I don't remember specifically what for. Either she was retreating or actually no. I think what happened was she de-transformed because she went back to Master Fu as Love Eater was deakumatized or whatnot. So, or deakumatized or whatnot. So she was confused about that. So she went to Master Fu, but ultimately Master Fu wasn't there. So she like had a little conversation with Tiki. Tiki like basically was confident that Master Fu was all right, but ultimately Marinette knew that that was not the case. That ultimately he was in trouble or whatnot. So ultimately she leaves, and then Luca comes and he asks her like, seeing like Marinette's distressed, he asks like, is everything all right? And then Marinette, at first she says like, yeah, everything's fine, and then like a couple seconds later, like after like a couple seconds of silence, she was like, who am I kidding? No, it's not all right. And then she confides in Luca. She cries, and Luca is there for her. He helps Marinette. So that is a really, that's probably the biggest instance or the biggest way that the failure part of Failure and Resolve is made apparent in the season finale through what Marinette saw as her biggest failure in unintentionally leading Hawkmoth to the Guardian of the Miraculous, as opposed to simply thinking of it as like an accident or sort of a simple mistake, given that she hasn't really made any mistakes before. She hasn't really, what would you call it? She hasn't really made any like flawed decisions before. In fact, this was recently after her performance in Kwame Buster, which is something that Master Fu commended. We saw him doing that with Waze. So that's the biggest instance of her failure in the way she basically confides in Luca. And then also it's shown somewhat later when she ultimately transforms and then goes into a water form to escape the wasps, since Miracle Queen was just created or akumatized by Hawkmoth. So ultimately, there's that. So, I mean, besides, because yeah, she escapes, she goes into the water, and ultimately she sees Chat Noir. So Chat Noir is kind of like, what's going on? Like, what's up? Like, I wasn't here for, or like I haven't seen anything, or I wasn't sure whether he asked about Master Fu specifically, but whatever. Regardless, ultimately Marinette has Ladybug. She confessed that she went back to Master Fu, and Master Fu was gone, and he was likely in trouble because she didn't de-transform before she went to him. And then ultimately Chat Noir comforts her, and she's also able to confide in Chat Noir as well, despite Luca and Chat Noir not being sort of her love interest. Those are still two people who have her back, who have her, who have her back, not backs, and that she can confide into. So ultimately, she's able to do that, and that's sort of like, I wouldn't say it's another instance of failure. It's mostly regarding her breakdown in front of Luca or with Luca or whatnot. Chat Noir, that's just like Marinette coming off of her breakdown. She sort of still feels bad, but like she obviously transformed to Ladybug to escape, so she kind of like is in a like pinned between like a rock and a hard spot or whatnot. I'm not sure what that quote is, but ultimately, Chat Noir is able to sort of snap out of it and say like, hey, like what matters now is saving Master Fu and defeating like Hawkmoth or whatnot, and that ultimately like you like we specifically Chat Noir referring to both of them, but mainly referring to Ladybug, how she is ultimately how she saved Paris multiple times. So a single mistake ultimately doesn't undo all of that. It doesn't undo her sort of legacy or what all the stuff she's done to help Paris, and that's sort of a good reminder for her in order to basically realize that, you know, it's something she can't change and that she kind of needs to reprioritize or redirect her priorities. So ultimately, that's not necessarily another instance of her failure, but it's more so, it really is more so in regards to her interaction with, uh, I guess, with Luca. Because it's, I guess, it in and of itself is not failure. Her failure would be failing to detransform to go see the Guardian, but it's more so a realization, a recognition of what she sees as her ultimate failure, pretty much. But yeah, that's so there's that. Um, so yeah, and then the resolve aspect of this. Hold on a moment. So the resolve aspect of that will then subsequently be her fighting or her battling or her going to battle Hawkmoth, basically Chat Noir realizing and correctly deducing the situation there, and their subsequent confrontation of Miracle Queen, their defeat of Miracle Queen, and ultimately they're going to basically try and attack Hawkmoth and prevent him from uh, beating the Guardian of the Miraculous, Master Fu. So that kind of shows her resolve. In fact, there's another supposed instance of failure when she ultimately defeats Miracle Queen. Ladybug defeats Miracle Queen, and she uses her lucky charm to figure out how to defeat Hawkmoth and Mayora up on sort of like the rooftop, attacking the Guardian, and she doesn't get any results. Hawkmoth then sort of confronts her, saying that there's absolutely zero way she can win, and that his plan was constructed perfectly. And that's sort of almost another instance of failure, but it's not the biggest instance of the recognition or realization of her failure, as that is sort of her breakdown and confiding in Luca. But ultimately, this is sort of like another sub, or it's like a sort of, it's another lesser instance, kind of like her own sort of breakdown and recognition or realization of what she seemed, or what she believes is her own failure in Chat Noir. This is kind of similar to that, her sort of not being able to come up with something to do with her lucky charm and Hawkmoth, then taunting her subsequently based off that. So that's kind of another sort of, that's kind of another instance. And I guess it's not so much failure, because failure and resolve, because failure, that's a physical tangible thing when looking at it from a literal perspective. But resolve, that's kind of more so like a character trait, like I said. But I guess rather than failure, we need to look at what each of the characters see as their own failure, in that obviously, or the instances where they sort of believe they have failed, because obviously they can fail, but at the moment it's doesn't really matter. And then later they recognize or realize their own failure, as what happened with Marinette when she confided in Luca. So it's not so much the failure itself, it's more so what they believe is failure, as well as their continuing resolve despite what they believe is their own failure. So I think that's a good way to do that. So in regards to the most, like, the way it's made most apparent in the season finale is Marinette's breakdown in Luca, and then subsequent, like, her confiding in Chat Noir, as well as Hawkmoth taunting her while she's not able to come up with something to do with her lucky charm. Those are more so lesser instances. Really, the main instance is her breaking down in Luca, and then her, that's sort of her, like, what she believes is, she basically believed herself to fail, and that was kind of like where she ultimately recognized, or she ultimately, basically, she herself, what she thought was her failure, it sort of came back to her. She sort of realized what she ultimately believed to be her failure at that moment. Before, she was focused on anything else, but at that moment, that was when she truly realized what she thought was, what she believed was her failure. So that was that. And then her subsequent resolve would be after Luca, after Luca talked to her, after she was able to confine Luca, and he was able to, sort of, what's the word for it? He was able to comfort her, and then ultimately when he saved her from being stung by a wasp and she's able to escape, that sort of shows her resolve. And then after she confides in Chat Noir, and Chat Noir also comforts her as Ladybug, she's then able to sort of deduce the situation, fight Miracle Queen, and nearly get on to fight Hawkmoth. And ultimately, before she's able to fight Hawkmoth, she uses her lucky charm and is unable to come up with something, like with something you do in order to defeat Hawkmoth. So the in between in between her like moments or moments where she has a realization of what she believes is her own failure is where her resolve is shown. And then ultimately, it can be said that after Master Fu gave up guardianship to Ladybug, that was also another moment of resolve for her. She now realized truly like the important role she plays now that she is the guardian, and ultimately her taking control of all the miraculous, including the I don't even know what the miraculous. It's like the miraculous itself is like a comb or something, but the be miraculous from Chloe. That's sort of another instance of her resolve that she's sort of stepping up. She's no longer gonna sort of like wallow like she's no longer gonna sort of like wallow in her sorrow after losing or after allowing Master Fu to be captured. She's now gonna step up and take matters into her own hands now that she is the guardian. So that also kind of shows her resolve, and that's the main instance in where it's made apparent her failure and resolve, or the theme of subsequently characters' realization of their supposed failures, as well as their resolve to push past those failures, to not let it hold them down. So that's the main instance. However, as I said before, there are multiple instances where it's made apparent in the season finale. So just hold on a moment. So, like I said, there's multiple instances, and I actually really only want to talk about two. I mean, the second instance is actually the quite the opposite. It's from Gabriel's perspective as Hawkmoth. Because I mean, obviously this was a big plan for him, and obviously he it seemed like, at least even from an on-looking person's perspective, it seemed like he was going to succeed. Like he arguably put more planning into this event than he did into the original Scarlet Moth event. And then obviously as a result, this event, it was a lot more, the chips were stacked a lot more against Ladybug and Chat Noir. Like, Ladybug did not break down during Scarlet Moth. She broke down during this event, during the battle for the Miraculous. So ultimately, I think that really goes to show how much planning sort of Hawkmoth puts into these, and how much sort of emphasis he puts on creating sort of the perfect scenario in which he can defeat Ladybug and Chat Noir. Now, obviously, he seemed on the brink of victory, despite Chloe as Miracle Queen being deakumatized. She actually put on all the miraculous and threatened to basically challenge Ladybug and Chat Noir, kind of similar to how Marinette was Minnie Mouse with all the miraculous. However, instead it would be used against her by Chloe with all the miraculous. Sort of that would have really had infinite potential in terms of miraculous usage, and sort of the chips were really against Ladybug this time, because despite the initial plan failing, the second part of the plan was ultimately seemed more destructive, with a Chloe with all the miraculous, as opposed to simply Chloe having transformed her friends, simply just Ladybug and Chat Noir going up against no miraculous users, as opposed to one user with all the miraculous, or all the extra miraculous. And ultimately, as we know, Hawkmoth and Mayor were chipping away at Master Fu's shield. Obviously, he couldn't stay like that for long. We saw that. So in what was supposed to be sort of his moment of triumph, ultimately Master Fu gave up ownership of the Miracle Box and his subsequent guardianship to Ladybug. And ultimately, that sort of Hawkmoth knew at that moment he lost. Granted, us as onlookers, we didn't actually know the sort of, what would you call it, the gravity of that situation until sort of after, where we saw that sort of all the Kwamis were then, or at least basically all the free Kwamis from Chloe were taken sort of from her, and she was unable to use her miraculous for her powers. And then Hawkmoth obviously saw that situation as a loss, as he could no longer sort of get the information he wanted from Master Fu, as Master Fu subsequently forgot all he did about the previous Miraculous owner. So he couldn't get the identities of Ladybug and Chat Noir. So in just like that, in a single instance, his plan was turned on its head, and he ultimately had to retreat. Him and Mayor just taking his Senti monster just away. Now, Hawkmoth at that moment, he kind of just like, I wouldn't say he realized his failure at that moment. It was sort of like it was sort of like almost instinct when his plan failed at that point that he left. Simply because most of his plans fail. However, I'm not going to talk about that in sort of like the scope of the whole show, mainly in the finale, as this is kind of where his failure and resolve, or I'll talk about it like in the build up to the finale, but I'm not going to talk about like every episode where Hawkmoth fails. I'll talk about how his failure and mainly his resolve has sort of led to this finale moment, and like everything that basically ultimately led to him being in that moment, and him basically him with the whole battle of the Miraculous, and him ultimately losing in that moment when his plan was turned on its head. So, but yeah, I like I said, I don't really think he realized his failure as soon as like when he was leaving. I think it was more so kind of just like instinct. He kind of realized that like yeah, he didn't I wouldn't say he like thought he necessarily failed. I would say he was more so I wouldn't say like he probably could have fought Ladybug and Chat Noir there, but I think like Hawkmoth, he really had to sort of weigh his odds there. Like he and Mayor probably could have fought Ladybug and Chat Noir as they've been transformed for a while. Like he had the option. It wasn't like he ran out of options. He simply realized that the odds were now against him. He didn't necessarily thought I wouldn't say he necessarily thought he failed in that instance, but he realized that the odds have turned against him in that moment. So he cut his losses, and he ultimately left the battle, ultimately leaving Ladybug to deal with Chloe at that instant. So obviously he left. He took Mayora and rode on a Senti monster out of there. He basically fled. He retreated or whatnot. But I mean, it was the right call. I mean, like I said, he could have fought Ladybug and Chat Noir with Mayora. That was an option. However, the odds were really against him. The odds really did change into uh, Ladybug and Chat Noir's favor, and he realized that, so he left. Not necessarily thinking that he failed, but ultimately that he no longer had any business being there. So there's that. Um, After that, besides the interaction between like Ladybug, Chat Noir, Chloe, their like sort of speculation about the new miracle box or whatnot. Besides that, we after sort of at the end of the show, we get a scene with Gabriel and Natalie. They're de-transformed, so that's first off. Gabriel is putting Natalie in the car, and ultimately she's not in good shape as she's been using the Peacock Miraculous for far too long. So ultimately, that's when I think Gabriel sort of realized his failure, sort of the gravity of his failure. Is obviously Ladybug failed in that like I said earlier, Ladybug failed in that she allowed Hawkmoth to discover the idea of the Guardian of the Miraculous. So she ended up losing Master Fu because of that. As Master Fu ultimately, obviously, at the moment, she more so realized her failure in the moment as, Master Fu was gone. And she ultimately realized that Hawkmoth got him. She didn't necessarily realize her failure after Master Fu transferred guardianship. That was more so like a moment of, obviously, he talked to Ladybug saying, she's the best Ladybug or Miraculous user he's ever seen or interacted with and whatnot. So as he transferred guardianship, her focus wasn't necessarily on losing Master Fu. It was more so that, maybe that Master Fu has moved on, that he can finally, like, sort of be at peace, given that Hawkmoth has fled the battle at that moment. In her interaction with Master Fu, it's more so that Master Fu can finally rest now, and that she will ultimately bear the burden of responsibility for being the guardian of the Miraculous, of the Miracle Box at that point. So that sort of adds to her resolve more so than her failure. But in Hawkmoth's situation, like going back to him with Natalie in the car, sort of Hawkmoth, his failures are kind of realized when every time he fails while Natalie is acting as Mayor, because he's on borrowed time with the Peacock Miraculous. Given that it's damaged, so long as every time Natalie uses it, her condition worsens and worsens. So every time he fails, or his plans fail, while Natalie is acting as Mayora, every time every time he fails in getting Ladybug and Chat Noir's Miraculous, while using Mayora, or while Mayora is a part of his plans, that's sort of there's pretty much more damage that is done to Natalie from the damage Miraculous. So that worsens her condition due to the damage Miraculous. So ultimately, that's how he realizes his failures. That's what he believes his failures to be, or ultimately not sort of realizes and ultimately not like what was the word I said? I don't even know. But yeah, that's how he realizes his failures ultimately. Now, because of this, it's kind of different as it's not necessarily a single instance like with Ladybug or with Marinette sort of confiding Luca after she realized that Hawkmoth got to the Guardian of the Miraculous. Obviously, that was the biggest instance, like I said. But Hawkmoth, he's failed plenty of times using Mayora as part of his plans, and he's seen Natalie's condition worsen, gradually worsen. However, this time's big is ultimately it was supposed to be sort of his ultimate triumph. This was sort of like his grandest plan besides Scarlet Moss. So this was supposed to be the one that would ultimately win him, as he ultimately not only confronted the Guardian of the Miraculous, but ultimately got the Miracle Box as well, and also ended up turning Chloe to his side, as well as exposing all the other Miraculous users. So he gained a lot from this encounter, from this sort of battle that he had with Ladybug and Chat Noir, this specific one. He probably gained as much as he could have without actually beating Ladybug. However, despite all that he gained, he's still realizing his failures, or his supposed failures, in that Natalie's condition still worsened despite him gaining all the information that he did. Ultimately, because he failed to get Ladybug and Chat Noir's Miraculous, Natalie's condition still worsened without sort of cause. Because obviously, if he used Natalie as Mayora in his plan, and ultimately he succeeded in getting Ladybug and Chat Noir's Miraculous, then he's done. I mean, he no longer needs Natalie to act as Mayora, so ultimately that's a victory on his part. That's a success in that was the last instance where he needed to use Natalie as Mayora. But ultimately, in this instance, where this is a much better explanation than I had earlier, where in that he's using Natalie as Mayora, and that despite no matter how much he gained, despite no matter how much information he gained, given that he beat the Guardian of the Miraculous, he had control over the Miracle Box for some time, he was able to bring Chloe onto his side. He was able to learn of the identities of all the other Miraculous users, given that he gained he gained probably as much as he could have without actually beating Ladybug and Chat Noir, however, still failing to get their Miraculous. That means, for him, what that means is that he ultimately used Natalie or Mayora for his plans without success. Despite how much he gained, he ultimately sees that as not succeeding in his ultimate goal, so that he may have to use Mayora in the future, and ultimately Natalie's condition worsened for no real reason. At least that's sort of how Gabriel's mindset is, and that if he doesn't succeed, his use of Natalie as Mayora was a waste. In that basically, despite everything he's gained, he ultimately didn't succeed, so he may need to use Natalie as Mayora in the future again, which will even worsen her condition even more. So ultimately, that's how he realizes, his supposed failures. That's what he believes his supposed failures are, because despite no matter how much information he gains, so long as he doesn't succeed in taking Ladybug and Chat Noir's Miraculous while using Natalie as Mayora, that is ultimately a failure, as she worsened her condition for nothing, at least in his mind, and ultimately he may have to use her as Mayora again, which will worsen her condition even more, and that is the last thing he wants. So I felt that was kind of interesting, because we saw that in the end scene, sort of Hawkmoth's failure realized, and that sort of he ultimately tells Natalie basically it wasn't worth the cost, of using Natalie as Mayora, given how many times he's failed, given how bad her condition has gone, given how worse it may still have yet to get. Ultimately, it wasn't worth it, because none of his plans succeeded. That's because he can akumatize anyone any day and lose nothing off of that. Like season 1, season 2, he akumatized pretty much anyone he could, and he lost nothing from it. Like, he didn't take any real losses. However, in season 3, every time he uses Natalie as Mayor, his condition worsens, or her condition worsens, and that's ultimately a loss to him every time. And that sort of culminated in the season finale, where he uses Natalie as Mayor in what was supposed to be his sort of grand plan, the final battle. And despite how much information he gained from that, how ultimately he still failed in his eyes, and that he did not succeed, and ultimately his use of Natalie was for naught, at least from his perspective. Granted, he gained a lot of useful information, and as Natalie pointed out, he gained sort of the book or the tablet that had a translated version of the grimoire that he had, so he could ultimately fix the Peacock Miraculous, but he still saw that as a failure, as he did not succeed in his primary goal. In Natalie's condition, he may need to use Natalie's Mayor in the future, which may worsen her condition. Ultimately, him using her during that battle was ultimately a waste, as he did not succeed. He might as well have just not followed through, at least in his mindset. So there's that. Hold on just a moment. This video is taking longer than I expected, but this is the last part, or at least for the first part of the video. So now we need to move on to resolve in sort of from Hawkmoth's perspective, because obviously it's failure and resolve. We talked about Marinette or Ladybug's supposed failure in letting Hawkmoth get to the Guardian of the Miraculous, Master Fu, and ultimately her subsequent resolve in defeating Miracle Queen Hawkmoth, and her gaining guardianship of, or ownership of the Miracle Box, and her becoming the new Guardian. So that shows her resolve, and now we need to look at Hawkmoth's resolve, as we talked about his failures, and now we need to talk about his resolve. So ultimately, his resolve, it's really not shown, it's not shown in a drawn-out sort of sequence or series of events as with Mana, or it's not drawn out throughout the episode. It's concentrated in a single instance. It's concentrated in a single scene, a single event, as opposed to being shown throughout the episode. So this should not take as much time, but basically the single instance or the single scene which Hawkmoth's resolve is shown, or Gabriel's resolve is shown, is the very last scene of the season. The very, very last sort of end credits, sort of teaser, sort of just, it's literally a 3-4 second clip at the very end of the episode. And that is when Hawkmoth is shown in the sanctuary holding up the Peacock Miraculous in his declaration that it is fixed. That is a show of his resolve. That is basically that is how his resolve is apparent in the season 3 finales. That's still technically a part of the finale, despite it being sort of a credit scene. So what that shows is that, first off, the Peacock Miraculous was obviously damaged. Gabriel could have easily just sort of chucked it, tossed it out, gotten rid of it as easily as he found it. That thing was a thorn in his side. That is what led to the death of his wife, and that was ultimately leading to Natalie's condition worsening. So he could have easily gotten rid of it. However, rather than do so, he kept it. And ultimately, given that he had the translated version of the grimoire on the Guardian's tablet, he was ultimately able to obviously go through all the work of translating it and realizing basically learning what he needed to do to fix the Miraculous, and then him going about fixing it, and then his resolve and dedication towards fixing the Miraculous, in which some may look at it as sort of Gabriel sort of advancing his plans, but I think that's more so him wanting to help Natalie's condition. If he thinks that a if he thinks that a non-damaged Miraculous, basically Natalie using the fixed Miraculous, can ultimately reverse her condition, I think that's more so what he was fixing it for, as opposed to advancing his own plans, as he was already using Mayora. We saw that. He was already using Natalie's Mayora. For whatever reason, we saw it in Reflecta, we saw it in Miraculous, we saw it in Feast, we saw it in Ladybug. Well, actually, he didn't use Mayora and Ladybug, but we saw it throughout the season where he was using Natalie's Mayora. So that doesn't really change his plans. However, he sees sort of the fixing of the Miraculous. I really think that he did that more so, or his sort of aim in doing that was more so to hopefully reverse Natalie's condition before it gets too late, as opposed to advancing his own means. But even so, regardless of his aims, simply him fixing it in general, and him basically his declaration that it's fixed, that's really shows his resolve, because obviously him fixing it, he needed to put time and effort in that. The story however long it took within the time span of the show or the universe or whatever, that's kind of irrelevant. But, or well, I guess it kind of is. But I mean, just him simply going about fixing it shows his resolve in order to work with the thing that's sort of almost the bane of his existence and ultimately transform it into something that could be used to prevent another accident that has already happened with it. So he's still coming out of it at a net loss if Natalie's condition sort of restores with the fixed Miraculous. So he's still coming out of it at a net loss. So he still hasn't gained anything, but he's still ultimately, his willingness to work with it ultimately shows his resolve in trying to sort of cut his losses, trying to really fix what he has kind of brought upon, or what he sees as what he brought upon Natalie, given him using her as Noir and ultimately the damaged Miraculous worsening her condition. And obviously, I mentioned how his declaration that it's fixed, like, sort of plays new as resolved. It really does, as it shows how, because you can tell a lot about a person through, like, their voice or whatnot, and basically their sort of expression. So his expression that's fixed, it really shows that he's motivated, he's passionate. Like, it wasn't sort of a depressive it's fixed where kind of like he realizes that, oh, he wasn't thinking about why couldn't I have gotten this fixed earlier, why didn't I realize this earlier, I could have saved my wife. It's more so that he now has the opportunity to save Natalie from what even if he didn't bring it upon his wife, he has the opportunity to save Natalie from what happened to his wife. He does not want to make that mistake again. So rather than blame himself for not realizing how it could have been fixed earlier, he instead sees that as a moment of opportunity to prevent his second ultimate failure in losing Natalie as well as his wife. So that sort of really shows his resolve, that rather than sort of be depressed, kind of like blaming himself for not doing it earlier, he ultimately sees it as another opportunity. And that is really something that every single one of Gabriel's Akumas that fail, he sort of takes the approach that that's simply another opportunity for him to defeat Ladybug and Cat Noir. And I think that really is what goes to show his resolve more than anything else. Gabriel's resolve in that he keeps akumatizing, he keeps coming back, he won't give up. Ultimately, he will take every step he can get in bringing himself closer to Ladybug and Chat Noir's defeat. He will take every opportunity, no matter how little it is, no matter how insignificant it seems, no matter what negative consequences or what apparent I wouldn't necessarily say negative consequences, but no matter what apparent risk there is, he will take that opportunity, as he sees that as monumental in defeating Ladybug and Chat Noir. So, just another moment. So that kind of shows Gabriel, like, I kind of brought that around to the whole season and the show itself, but that really shows how Gabriel's failure, or his sort of realization of his supposed failures, or his realization of his supposed failures, as well as his resolve to push past those failures, is ultimately sort of apparent in the season 3 finale, the entirety of season 3 and the show. So we're done with the first part of the video. That was actually longer than I anticipated, but just kind of going back through it again. So the first part of this video was themes of Miraculous Ladybug. Granted, I didn't go over the themes of the whole show, as there are tons I could discuss. Instead, I went through which theme was most prevalent in each season, or during the seasons, what theme was most prevalent, and how it was made apparent in the season finale. For season 1, I talked about how duty was the main theme, or main character or personality trait in the season finale, and how it applied to Marinette and Adrian in the finale, as well as how that made itself apply throughout the whole season. For season 2, I talked about how the main theme of season 2 was doing the right thing, and how that was made apparent in the finale through Marinette's offers to Chloe and Hawkmoth, and ultimately how then it was subsequently made apparent through the rest of the season. Now, for season 3, I talked about the main theme being failure and resolve, or characters' realization of their supposed failures and resolve to push past their supposed failures. Now, that was made apparent in the season 3 finale through both Marinette's failure and resolve and Gabriel's failure resolved, and then how that subsequently made itself apparent through the rest of the season. So there's that for the first part of the video. Now, this next part, I honestly don't think should take that long. Like, will probably be like 15 to 20 minutes. This is sort of just an add-on. But this second part of the video is actually what got the inspiration for the rest of the video, so that's why it's a part of this. But ultimately, this second part is sort of how, or I guess we've talked about how I mentioned this sort of in the implications video, but I'm not specifically going to talk about that, as I'm talking about only single instances here. I'm not talking about every instance where Ladybug and Chat Noir can figure out each other's identity. I'm talking about the single easiest way they can, that would be, as obviously we know they won't figure out each other's identity, and as onlookers we can sort of compile all the instances where they can figure out each other's identity and say, look, why isn't it obvious they know each other? But so rather than focus on both of those, we need to focus on sort of the single easiest way they can, given the current events in the show, from sort of their perspective, as if it were to happen, that would likely be how it would happen. So there's that. That's what we need to talk about. So yeah, I mean, we'll look at both Marinette and Adrian's perspective, and in their superhero forms. So yeah, like I said, just before I go into it, so because like obviously everyone says like it's obvious how they could figure out each other. I mean, they look so similar in that basically there's so many instances where it's made obvious that that they are Ladybug and Chat Noir, that who Ladybug and Chat Noir really is, at least from Marinette and Adrian's perspective. So we need to make a couple assumptions going into this. One, appearance means nothing. So like we need to ignore how similar Marinette and Ladybug look. We need to ignore how similar Adrian and Chat Noir look. In fact, the only two villains who look nothing, or the only two miraculous users who look nothing like their like sort of person, like what would you call it? They're sort of they're like what I would call their civilian personalities is Hawkmoth and Mayor. Those are the only two, literally. So yeah, so one, we need to assume that looks and appearance mean nothing. That does not apply. And second, we're taking a look at this from Ladybug and Chat Noir's perspective, or no, from Marinette and Adrian's perspective. Not looking as outsiders, not like what was the term I used? Not like sort of not looking into the show, not being like sort of observers, not like compiling every single moment and saying how easy it is. We're simply taking a look at the easiest way they could figure out each other's identities. Because obviously we can compile all the ways that they can figure out each other's identities and say, look, it's easy, it's them. However, we need to take the approach as how if Adrian and Marinette were to figure out the other's superhero identity, or basically how they would figure out Ladybug and Chat Noir's true identity, how it would go about, how the easiest way to do that will be. We're looking at this from an in-show perspective, or we're looking at this in the show from like sort of the what would you call it? In the boundaries of the show, and strictly from Marinette and Adrian's perspective. It will become apparent what I talk about, because I'm literally just going to bring up two instances, or two events, and I'm going to ignore everything else, as these two instances would be most likely how Ladybug and Chat Noir would figure out each other's secret identity. Now, I think with that sort of explanation out of the way, sort of taking those two assumptions before we go into this, that one, appearance means nothing, and two, we're looking at single instances, we're looking at the most likely instances within the boundaries of the show from Marinette and Adrian's perspective, not compiling every single instance and saying how obvious it is. No. So, I mean, yeah, I guess with that out of the way, we'll get into it. Hold on for a moment. But yeah, so besides that, let's get into it. All right, so let's take a look at Marinette's first. How Marinette would figure out Chat Noir's Adrian the easiest way she could, or basically given the events that happened in the show, which event would lead her to figuring out that Chat Noir's Adrian? What event would make it easiest for her to do that? Because there are many events, but we need to look at the easiest. Now, the easiest event which I believe leads her to the identity of Chat Noir, or sort of the event which I wouldn't necessarily say easiest, but but the most obvious event, or I guess not even obvious, apparent. Yeah, the event which makes it basically, I guess, no, I guess it would be somewhat easiest, but basically the event which would lead her to the identity of Chat Noir. Or basically, if she was thinking about Chat Noir's identity, or pretty much, I guess, I'll put a timestamp at this point in the video because I can't really think of what the correct word would be. Because it's not like necessarily easy, but it's more so if it were to happen, this would be it. I guess the most realistic event, yeah, realistic. The most realistic event, if she were to discover Chat Noir's identity, the event which would most realistically lead her to Chat Noir would be this one. Now, I'm going to talk about the event now, ignoring all the blabbering I was doing before. So, Star Train. This is the episode of Star Train where Max's mom gets akumatized, and ultimately he receives the Horse Miraculous to help Ladybug and Chat Noir, despite me thinking that Nathaniel should have gotten the Horse Miraculous. That's sort of not my, me thinking that Sabrina should have gotten the Horse Miraculous. Ultimately, that's not my decision. Yeah, because obviously Max got and he helped Ladybug and Chat Noir. But during this episode, there is an instant, a single scene, a single event, which could lead Marinette to the identity of Ladybug and Chat Noir. And that is when she, as a Ladybug, meets Chat Noir in the train. Now, if you know what I'm talking about, like, it's gonna be obvious. It's kind of gonna be kind of a letdown for all the explanation. But basically, what happens is Ladybug asks Chat Noir basically, Chat Noir asks Ladybug how she got here, and she said, in Marinette lying, she said that she teleported here using the Horse Miraculous. She had it. And then she ultimately asks how Chat Noir got here. Now, Chat Noir, honestly, I'm not even going to blame Chat Noir because Ladybug kind of put him in that position as he had no real good excuse he could come up with right away. But he simply says that he was already on the train. And saying he made some dorky like comment about cats being lucky or whatnot, and then Ladybug really said that he shouldn't have said that, as that would basically potentially lead them to each other's identities, as they can really know nothing about each other. Granted, she didn't really give him a choice because she really put him on the spot there, but I mean that basically, yeah, what she said was right in that Chat Noir kind of, he should have, I mean, even if he said something bullshit, like she would see through it and realize it, but at least he wouldn't have said it up front. So yeah, that is the single instance, that is the single event that would realistically, if it were to happen, it would be the single most event that would realistically allow Marinette to figure out who Chat Noir's identity really is. Now, the reason this would be is simply because the only class that was on the train, at least given what we know, or I guess not necessarily, as there were other people on the train. However, given that where, I guess, Chat Noir and Ladybug came from, I guess, here's the thing. We don't really have a head count how many people were on the train. However, we know that Miss Boustier's class was grouped up in a single section. We know that the only person who was away from them was Chloe, who was sitting in the front with other people in like VIP or first class or whatnot. But given that Chat Noir was that far back in the train as opposed to being, up front in VIP or whatnot, Ladybug could likely assume that he is in Miss Boustier's class. And that is a big ramification. I guess that was the term I wanted to use for all my previous videos, but instead of implication. But that is a big ramification for the series if Marinette as Ladybug figures out that Chat Noir is in Miss Boustier's class. Because obviously, that would be what would sort of tick her off to sort of the idea that maybe Chat Noir is in Miss Boustier's class. And then she would start thinking about all the other events, which would only confirm her suspicions, despite her Marinette ultimately not wanting to figure out who Chat Noir is. She would have to deal with the fact that he likely is in Miss Boustier's class. However, this would ultimately be the event that would sort of tip her to that, as Chat Noir wasn't in the front of the bus. He came out of the bathroom sort of like near Miss Boustier's class, and we can likely assume that sort of they were in the back of the bus, likely, or the back of the train, not bus, given that, just that they were traveling to Paris. It's not like a class of students is going to get like first class VIP. Given that Chat Noir was that far in the back of the train and Ladybug was there as well, and basically he was near Miss Boustier's class when it happened, Marinette as Ladybug would likely assume that, or at least she would get the idea that Chat Noir is in Miss Boustier's class, and that ultimately, you know, confirm her suspicions through other suspicious events that have happened with Chat Noir in the past. And she would likely have to just deal with that thought, despite her not wanting to discover Chat Noir's identity. So, just a moment. So, given that, if she does truly realize that Chat Noir is in Miss Boustier's class, at that point it's simply process of elimination. I mean, she knows who all the other Miraculous users are in that class. She knows Alia Nino are Reina Rouge and Carapace, so that cuts them out. She knows Chloe is Queen Bee, so that cuts her out. She knows that Luca... Kagami's not in her class, right? No, she's not. Wait, Luca isn't even in her class. Ignore those two. She knows that Max and Kim are... I don't even remember their names, but she knows who they are, who they're transformed as. She knows that Lila's definitely not Chat Noir. She knows that for sure. And she... I mean, honestly, and then the rest of her class got akumatized. And she has fought them actively with Chat Noir. So yeah, and the only person who wasn't was Adrian. I mean, even the teacher, Miss Boussier herself, was akumatized. So basically, ultimately, if she figures out that Chat Noir is in Miss Boustier's class from that Star Train scene, it would basically be a dead giveaway to her. There would be no other option for who Chat Noir is but Adrian. So that would basically be, if she makes that realization, then she knows Chat Noir's identity. There is no other way that would play out. So yeah, kind of wrapping it up, if, let's say, if Ladybug, or sort of the most realistic event that would lead Ladybug to, or that would lead Marinette to discover Chat Noir's identity, if it were to happen in the show, would be her discovery of him on Star Train, which would lead her to believe he is in Miss Boustier's class, given the proximity of him to the class when he sort of came out of the bathroom. So there's that. That's Marinette. That's how Marinette would figure out Chat Noir's identity. Now we need to look at the other way around, how Adrian would figure out Ladybug's identity. So hold on a moment. The thing is, Adrian, let's put it this way. Adrian's naive. He's ignorant. I mean, he's kind of stupid. It was already made apparent in Where Dad that Adrian had the opportunity to discover Ladybug's identity. So we're going to ignore that, as that's probably the closest he came to discovering Ladybug's identity. And if he was only smarter, he could discover Ladybug's identity. I mean, he can't even discover Marinette has a crush on him, so he would likely never discover Ladybug's identity. But obviously, the most obvious instance where he has the opportunity to figure out her identity is during Where Dad. So, I mean, we can't look at that. We kind of need to ignore that, as that's already happened. We need to look at another instance where he would discover it, as given he passed up the thought that Marinette was Ladybug during Where That. Given he passed up that thought, we need to look at another instance which would lead him to discover that, which he could realistically discover that Ladybug is Marinette. So we need to look at our instance, or what would be this? I would call the second most obvious instance besides that one in Where Dad. So, I'm sorry, but so yeah, the second most obvious instance. This is actually in sort of two parts. The first part is Adrian as Chat Noir, his realization that Marinette is Minnie Mouse. Now, this happens in Kwame Buster, where Marinette, in order to sort of prevent Chat Noir from figuring out her identity, as she ultimately believes that Chat Noir, well, she first off believes that Chat Noir may be Adrian, but she also believes that Chat Noir may be sort of coming on to her identity, or her identity may become revealed if things continue as the way they do. So what she does is she uses the Fox Miraculous as Minnie Mouse when she is divided to create an illusion and play a scene. So it is the illusion is Ladybug and Minnie Mouse. Ladybug purifies the Akuma. Ultimately, Minnie Mouse detransforms, and it's Marinette. So ultimately, basically, the scene goes something like this. So, well, I guess before, I'm not really sure what the right terms would be, but yeah, basically, for whatever reason, Chat Noir was on the verge of figuring out Ladybug's identity is Marinette's identity as Ladybug. So she needed something quick in order to divert his suspicions. So basically, what happened? Yeah, because the entire episode was confusing. I need to rewatch it. Basically, her as using the Mouse Miraculous gives her the ability to divide herself into smaller, basically divide herself, but she gets smaller, obviously. So basically, with all her tiny selves, she gives them Miraculous as well. So that's pretty much how she defeats Kwame Buster. But what she does is while she's divided using the Mouse Miraculous, and while her divided self has the Fox Miraculous, she plays an illusion for Chat Noir. So that's how she's able to do that. But I just need to get that out of the way because that was very confusing to me, and I just needed to explain that because I didn't get that until I watched the second time through. But the illusion she plays for Chat Noir goes like this. So it's obviously Ladybug and Minnie Mouse, which Minnie Mouse was the person who came to Chat Noir's rescue. This was before Marinette used Divide. So ultimately, or I guess so, she plays the illusion of Ladybug and or I guess Minnie Mouse. Obviously, they look the same, but like I said, appearances and looks do not matter. Thrown out the window. So it's Ladybug and Minnie Mouse. So Ladybug, as Chat Noir comes out, as sort of he needed to get his Miraculous back, so Ladybug would figure out his identity. So as he finally gets his Miraculous transformed in the Chat Noir comes out, Ladybug then purifies the Akuma. Remember, this is illusion. So the illusion is Ladybug purifies the Akuma. She sort of wishes everything back to normal. And then ultimately, Minnie Mouse, she then takes off Miraculous and she takes off her Miraculous and said, oh, I'm supposed to give this back to you, right? And then basically what Adrian sees as Chat Noir is that Minnie Mouse is Marinette, which is the superhero who assisted them, who assisted him and Ladybug during Kwame Buster. So I actually think she was divided when she assisted Chat Noir. Yeah, she was divided, so she was the one, while divided, who she gave Chat Noir in the banana costume his Miraculous. So yeah, so Chat Noir knows that Minnie Mouse was a superhero who could divide, who was given a Miraculous by Ladybug. That's what he knows, despite it not being true. And what he sees is that Minnie Mouse takes off her Miraculous and it's Marinette. So he now knows that, or what he thinks is that Ladybug chose Marinette to be Minnie Mouse, so that Ladybug herself could not be Marinette. And obviously when Minnie Mouse takes off her Miraculous and it's revealed to be Marinette and she says something like, oh, I'm supposed to give this to you, right? And Ladybug says, no, no one else is supposed to know your identity but me. And then she like points to Chat Noir or whatnot. And then like Chat Noir just kind of stands there. And then she, in the illusion, Ladybug tells Marinette that, oh, now that you've exposed your identity to Chat Noir, I can't give you the Miraculous anymore or whatnot. So then there's that. I mean, Marinette has like, she like says hi to Chat Noir or whatnot, and then, or the illusion, Marinette says that and then like leaves or whatnot. Or basically, yeah, she's basically, as an illusion, Marinette kind of just like makes it apparent that she's Minnie Mouse. She didn't like try and hide from Chat Noir. She showed her face to Chat Noir, and she's like, oh, hey Chat or whatnot, or something stupid. But just to make it as obvious as it could be that she is Minnie Mouse, despite it not being the truth. And obviously, Adrian realizes that as Chat Noir because it was made so obvious. He knows it's sort of, I wouldn't say drilled, but it's more so basically it's ultimately made extremely apparent that Marinette is Minnie Mouse, and it wasn't just like Kagami or something facing away from him, so that's out of the window. But yeah, then ultimately what happens is Chat Noir leaves because he has no business being there anymore. And then what happens is the illusion is sort of revealed, or the illusion is cast away, and it's revealed that actually Marinette as Minnie Mouse, she still has all her divided selves holding the Miraculous and holding the Akuma down. So ultimately what she does is she sort of undivides herself and transforms back into one person, and then ultimately transforms back into Ladybug rather than Mouse, or the Mouse Miraculous, or herself as Minnie Mouse, and then purifies the Akuma for real this time without Chat Noir seeing it, as then he would know it was an illusion, and that would likely lead him to thinking Marinette is Ladybug. But in this situation, Marinette successfully convinced Chat Noir that she is Minnie Mouse and not Ladybug is someone else. So, or basically more so that Marinette is in fact not Ladybug, despite whatever suspicion Chat Noir may have. So there's the first part of this one. So, just hold on a moment. So that's the first part of this. The second, because it's kind of like a two-part, which would lead Chat Noir to potentially discovering Ladybug's identity. So the first part is more so his, not even everything that Marinette did as Ladybug in order to trick Chat Noir. It's more so, or I guess, yeah, to trick Chat Noir. It's not necessarily about everything Ladybug did as Marinette, but it's more so, the first part is Chat Noir's realization, or Chat Noir's knowledge that Marinette is Minnie Mouse. So that's the first part. The second part is actually the season finale. And this was actually my inspiration for this whole video, or this whole recording. This realization here, this sort of instance where I was thinking about the season finale and I thought about this and I'm like, this has some ramifications on the series. So, or this was just something that I missed like watching the season finale twice, actually. It's something I missed twice. So I'm not sure everyone else like realizes this or realizes the full ramifications or implications to this, but let's say you skip to this point in the video. I'm about to explain something in the season 3 finale. That's not necessarily a plot hole, but it is something big. So, at the season 3 finale, we know that Miracle Queen's second order is for all Miraculous users to step forward, or basically to come to her to retrieve their Miraculous. Now, we know that the exclusions are Hawkmoth and Mayora as they're standing behind her. Ladybug and Chat Noir as they're currently transformed. So everyone else besides those 4 were ordered, basically had to come to Chloe's Miracle Queen, as the entirety of Paris was transformed at this point. Now, there is one exception though. Alia came forth as she was Rena Rouge. Nino came forth as he's Carapace. Kagami came forth as she had the Dragon Miraculous. I don't remember her transform name. Luca came forth as he had the Snake Miraculous. Max came forth as he had the Horse Miraculous. Kim came forth as he had the Monkey Miraculous. I swear there was one more. Is that escaping my mind? No, I don't think so. Those were the only 2 who were introduced new Miraculous. Or the 4 who were introduced new Miraculous. There should be 6, right? Yeah, I count 6. Because obviously you would have the 2 excluding Chloe from the original team of 5 in Scarlet Moth. And then you have the 4 new Miraculous holders being Luca, Kagami, Kim, and Max. So a total of 6 people came forward. And ultimately 4 people grabbed their Miraculous. Kagami and Max didn't grab their Miraculous. Wait, was it Max? Yeah, I think Kagami and Max didn't grab their... Or no, it was Nino and Kagami who didn't grab their Miraculous, because Master Fu had the Turtle Miraculous, and then Ladybug had the Dragon Miraculous. They didn't grab their Miraculous. So, everything seems normal, right? Yeah, everything seems normal. But this is the big plot hole. This is sort of the big ramification or implication. If you skip to this point in the video, I didn't realize this after watching the season finale twice. I only randomly thought of it, so I doubt most people sort of figured this out, but here it goes. The one person who is missing is Minnie Mouse. Here's the thing though, the one person who's missing is Marinette as Minnie Mouse. The thing is, we know that Marinette is Ladybug as sort of onlookers into the show, looking into the show itself, sort of as like observers. However, Chat Noir does not know that. So, I mean, given we know everyone in Paris was sung by Miracle Queen's wasps, so Marinette couldn't have escaped that. That's for sure. So she should be there. She should be there with her Miraculous. However, why isn't she? Like, we know Chat Noir fought. Who did they fight? They fought Alia. They fought Luca. They fought Max and Kim. So they fought those four. They fought those four during the episode while they were transformed as Miracle Queen sort of servants. Ladybug and Chat Noir. As we know, Nino and Kagami, they didn't have their Miraculous, so they couldn't fight. However, when Ladybug and Chat Noir defeat them and disable Miracle Queen, like, I mean, obviously, I think honestly, Alia, wait, no. Because once they disabled Miracle Queen, or once they deakumatized her, everyone in Paris was free from her control. So obviously, the people who were there present at the battle then were just Alia deakumatized, Nino deakumatized, Kagami deakumatized, Luca deakumatized, Max deakumatized, and Kim deakumatized. However, there's one person missing, and that's Marinette. Throughout this battle, there were multiple instances where Chat Noir could have realized that. Or basically, Chat Noir never fighting Marinette in this battle, or never fighting Minnie Mouse during the battle, and knowing that they did not have the Mouse Miraculous. So there are two parts that don't add up. One, they didn't have the Minnie Mouse, they didn't have the Mouse Miraculous, and yet they weren't fighting Minnie Mouse in sort of the bubble that they created in order to fight all the Miraculous holders who were servants to Miracle Queen. And two, that Marinette was not there once everyone was de-transformed or deakumatized or whatnot. She was not there on the sidelines, just in case, if her Miraculous, or if the Mouse Miraculous was in use, Marinette still was not there on the sidelines watching on like Kagami and Nino. So those are two sort of separate realizations, or two sort of separate instances that should have tipped Adrien as Chat Noir off that something was wrong. However, it did not happen. Honestly, I literally just thought of that on my own time. Like, I was randomly doing stuff one day and I realized, wait a second. Marinette as Minnie Mouse was not at the final battle. And granted, we know Ladybug is Marinette. Adrien as Chat Noir doesn't. So he should think that Marinette as Minnie Mouse should have been there. However, she wasn't. Now, ultimately, and the reason why I spent so much time on the first and second part is the first part ultimately comes down to Chat Noir's realization, or Chat Noir's knowing, or basically Chat Noir learning that, or learning that Marinette is supposedly Minnie Mouse. I don't know where to put supposedly in that sentence. Or Chat Noir falsely learning that Marinette is Minnie Mouse. And then the second part being the lack of Minnie Mouse or Marinette at the final battle for the Miraculous in the season finale. Those two realizations, if Adrien puts those two together, it becomes fairly obvious. I mean, he was already suspicious of Marinette before, and I'm surprised he wasn't still suspicious despite all the events that have seemingly played out to sort of convince him that Marinette is not Ladybug. However, obviously, we know Adrien is naive, ignorant. So, obviously, those are fine. Those are a pass. However, in the season finale, there is no excuse for, I guess, so long as Adrien doesn't realize it, it's fine. However, if Adrien were to realize it, there would be no excuse for him not to figure out that Marinette is Ladybug. That is the most obvious conclusion to draw from that. There's no other conclusion he can draw from that, given the entirety of Parents was stung, given Miracle Queen directly ordered everyone who has used a Miraculous to come to her and ultimately retrieve it and fight them. There would be no sort of way to sideline his theory or whatnot, or to sideline what the truth is in that moment. There would be no other explanation. The only explanation would be that Marinette is Ladybug. So, kind of going back, like I said, if the first part was that Chat Noir learning that Marinette, or Chat Noir ultimately being sold, or I guess I don't even know how to phrase it, but Chat Noir supposedly learning that Marinette is Minnie Mouse, and then the lack of Minnie Mouse or Marinette in the final battle. Those two, if he were to connect those two events, then the answer is obvious, that Marinette is Ladybug, and that she made an illusion for him to believe that she was Minnie Mouse. There would be no other explanation. Zero other explanation. It's not like Dad, where he could come up with some random excuse that, or some random explanation that he came up with in where Marinette wasn't Ladybug. There is no other option if he were to figure out those two, then Marinette is Ladybug. So, I guess with that out of the way, that one's, despite needing more explanation, that one's arguably more obvious than Marinette figuring out Chat Noir's identity through her interaction with him on Star Train, and her learning that he's in Moose Boustier's class. Because Adrien, he wouldn't even need to make an assumption from beyond his initial realization. If he simply puts 1 and 2 together, in that Marinette is Minnie Mouse, and neither Marinette nor Minnie Mouse were present at the final battle, he would immediately, the only explanation would be that Marinette is Ladybug, as opposed to Marinette figuring out Chat Noir's identity through her learning that he's in Miss Boustier's class, and her having to figure out who he is. Or I guess first off, she would have to correctly deduce that he is in Miss Boustier's class, and then it becomes apparent. Chat Noir, it's simply a combination of two events or facts that he already knows, that if he put them together, it would lead him to the identity of Ladybug and Chat Noir, so, or Ladybug as Marinette. So, yeah, I mean, that's all. I'm gonna go through this video again, or basically, I don't even need to do that, because I already did that for the first part, and I kind of just did that for the second part. But yeah, I mean, honestly, that's it. That's a wrap-up. I'm not sure I'm going to make, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, I'm not sure I'm going to make, obviously this is the last video for winter break, but I'm not sure I'm going to make any more Miraculous Ladybug videos after this. I mean, when season 4 comes out, I'm not sure I want to make Miraculous Ladybug videos for that. Like, I'm honestly not too sure. I probably won't. It's completely up to my discretion, but I highly doubt I will. I think I'm done after season 3. I made some videos for season 1 and 2, and then I made a lot of videos for season 3, and I'm likely done now. As season 4 will likely have even more story and more plot, and will lead into sort of the closing of the episode. So that's kind of where I want to stay away from, is that will be where most of the theory and speculation are going to find themselves, and I'm simply content with everything I already did to show up to this point in seasons 1, 2, and 3. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, really, I think that's it. This episode, or this, not episode, why do I keep saying that? This video recording or whatnot, this video, it really covered sort of two things, basically. The themes of Miraculous Ladybug, and how they're made apparent, and how the season themes are made apparent through the season finale, season 1 finale, season 2 finale, season 3 finale. And also the easiest way Ladybug and Chat Noir could figure out each other's identity, through specific instances and events where they can draw the logical conclusion from, through Marinette's realization that Chat Noir is in Miss Boustier's class from her interaction with him on Star Train, and Chat Noir's realization that neither Minnie Mouse nor Marinette were at the final battle, and given that he knows Marinette is supposedly Minnie Mouse, the only logical explanation would be that the one person who wasn't stung by the wasps was Ladybug. So that would be the only logical conclusion for him, that Marinette is Ladybug. So, I mean, I think that's everything. I don't have anything more to say. That's all for this video and this sort of series, I didn't anticipate recording Miraculous Ladybug, honestly. I made an initial video, I think it's in miscellaneous and idling, during, like, not this summer, but the summer before that, in that ultimately I ended up making another video, or I made a decent amount of videos last winter break. It was a season 1 and 2 comparison, season 2 improvements, season 3 predictions, and then the finale predictions, Marinette being in Kumatais parts 1, 2, and 3. And then I made all my other videos this year during Thanksgiving break and winter break. So, yeah, it was honestly a good run. It was a good run. I think I basically got everything I needed to say out there, so there's nothing really to say more, and that is sort of the end of me covering Miraculous Ladybug content, kind of like how I may be at the end of covering Civilization content, as sort of like an end video for this sort of break. Likely what's gonna happen is now, moving forward, starting during the summer, I will only really be playing DLC mods and Pokemon games, most notably Pokemon Surgeons, which I still need to finish. So there's that. That's all I have. So, I mean, yep, that's really all I've got. That's all for this video. That's all for this sort of break. So, yep, that's it for today, and I guess we'll see what happens then.